So we are just a few hours away from the first ever, the inaugural NWSL free agency. It feels like Christmas morning if your favorite player isn't about to leave your team, I guess. And that's kind of the crux of the matter, right? Ultimately, we should be extremely happy that these players, for the first time in their career after all these years of service to the NWSL, have the opportunity to choose their own destiny. Some may leave the league, some may find new teams, but the fact is that these players can make more money because they can decide where they want to go. They can pit teams against each other. Does Debinha stay in the NWSL? I think so, but the option of her leaving the league is also on the table, and that's going to drive her price tag up. And we'll talk about that in a second. But let's kind of go through the huge list of names of free agents. Then I'll shout out a couple of my big names, the big names I'm looking at, where I think they could go, what that impact could be on their team. I think it's pretty unanimous that the winter of Debinha is here, and I don't think anyone has her picked to go back to North Carolina. So let's go through this list. Of course, NWSL free agency. Not every name on this list will sign somewhere else. Some will resign. Some may not sign at all. We have Lauren Barnes, formerly of OL Reign. Nicole Barnhart of the Washington Spirit, formerly of the Kansas City Current as well. Nicole Barnhart, it's interesting. I'm not sure if she is still NWSL quality, but we can move on. Katie Bowen of the North Carolina Courage, Amber Brooks of Washington Spirit and Double Birds fame, Danielle Colaprico of Chicago Red Stars. Chicago Red Stars have quite a number on this list. Jaylene Daniels of North Carolina, Debinha, of course, of North Carolina as well, Vanessa DiMarnardo of Chicago, Orlando Pride's Megan Doherty-Howard, Elizabeth Eady from Houston Dash, Kristen Edmonds from Kansas City Current, Julie Ertz from Angel City, but she never played for Angel City, of the Chicago Red Stars. Kelly Farquharson of the Houston Dash, Mandy Freeman of Gotham, Morgan Gautreau of Chicago Red Stars. Again, that's another huge name on this list. Tobin Heath of the OL Reign, Chicago Red Stars, Rachel Hill, Tori Huster from Washington Spirit, Estelle Johnson of Gotham, Caitlin Johnson of San Diego Wave, Shayna Matthews of Racing Louisville, that's a name on this list. Yuki Nakasato of the Red Stars, that's another name on this list. Kelly O'Hara of the Spirit, and I think Kelly O'Hara goes back to the Spirit. I think that's pretty much a given. Denise O'Sullivan of the Courage, Tony Presley of the Pride, Megan Rapinoe of OL Reign. I'm pretty sure she resigns with OL as well. Brittany Ratcliffe of North Carolina Courage, Domi Richardson of Gotham, Caitlin Rowland of North Carolina, Sophie Schmidt just re-signed, Desiree Scott of the Kansas City Current, Portland Thorns Ab Smith, Havana Saloon of North Carolina, Meredith Speck as well. Jasmine Spencer of Angel City, Nicole Stanton of OL Reign, Jordy Taylor of San Diego, Erica Timerick of Orlando Pride, Michelle Vasconcelos of Portland Thorns, and that's an interesting name because she was in Valencia earlier this year as well. She's been bouncing around a bit. She might not sign within the NWSL. Marta, of course, of the Pride. Marta's a very interesting name. I did a write-up earlier of my big names on this list, and I kind of didn't put Marta in there, but now that I'm thinking about it, I don't know if she leaves Orlando Pride. I think what Orlando has done there is enough for her to stay, but this is kind of her last chance to make a run at an NWSL title, especially ahead of the 2023 World Cup, potentially her last run at the World Cup as well. I think that's a very intriguing name. Kalia Watt of the Red Stars, Aaron Wright of the Red Stars as well, and McCall Zamboni of Gotham. I think it's interesting how many Red Stars names are on here and how many of those Red Star names are kind of crucial to their defensive setup. Especially given their ownership situation, it could be ugly for them over the next couple of weeks. But all right, so let's talk about the elephant in the room. Debinha, of course. The winter of Debinha is just a few hours away from getting started. Debinha, North Carolina Courage, two-time NWSL champ, has been top 10 in pretty much every offensive category since she came into the league. Last year was first in shot creating actions, and that's our first in non-penalty goals, top 10 in shot creating actions, and that's someone North Carolina is not the same team without her. Debinha was the driving force between that big three of Carolyn and Danielle Ordonez. Without her, those two are still dangerous, but Debinha was the driving force for sure. That's a perennial MVP candidate just off your team and you don't recruit back any sort of assets. Now, as one of the other 9 GMs in the league, how many opportunities do you get to sign one of the best players in the world without having to give up something significant in return? This is a Class A chance to take your team into another stratosphere. And I think that the most logical signing for me, looking through the rosters, looking through where she would fit in, is probably Angel City. I think Gotham is a good shout too. But if Debinha wants to go somewhere that her presence instantly takes them from playoff fringes into contenders for an NWSL title, Angel City is the way to go. Angel City has the money. They have the power, the sway to bring her in. LA, playing in Bank California Stadium, I think that's very tantalizing as opposed to the Gotham play setup, not having kind of their, bouncing around stadiums a little bit as much as they typically play at Red Bull Arena. I think that's a little bit more, not to say that what Gotham is building this year isn't tantalizing, but I think Angel City is so much closer. Gotham's still going to take a couple of years to get there, even if they add Debinha. And Debinha being plugged into Angel City kind of makes them the perfect roster. And it gives them an opportunity, too, with Kristen Press and with Sydney LaRoe's injury history. Being able to plug in Debinha into that lineup not only makes it a little bit easier for Kristen Press to come back because she can kind of take her time, not having to rush in. Angel City doesn't have to rely on her ahead of 2023 World Cup. But think of her next to Endo, them playing off each other, that mass chaotic energy that Endo brings too. That is enough to kind of get that over the line in my head. Not to say that Gotham doesn't make sense, not to say that there aren't other situations in this league that make sense for Debinha. I'm sure every team in this league, every team in the world should be trying to sign her. But I think Angel City just makes too much sense. Okay. So that's kind of where I think Debinha is going to go. Next on my list, I have Tobin Heath. Tobin Heath is also interesting. Coming back from Arsenal last year, she had a fantastic season at Arsenal, but was never able to really fit in with OL Reign's offense. She played decent, had 1 goal in 5 games, had some injury issues, which I think may determine where she ends up signing. Because the obvious shout here, again, is Angel City with her connection with Kristen Press, with kind of wanting to be on the West Coast. Angel City at face value makes sense. But I don't know if Angel City wants to commit to 3 aging forwards with injury history. I think that is maybe a little bit of a gamble. Now, it could play out well. Tobin Heath could be healthy, could be, fit and ready to roll. But I think the better shout is probably San Diego Wave. She played with Casey Stoney, under Casey Stoney at Manchester United. Played fantastic at Manchester United, had a great time there. And I think you could rekindle that play with someone who understands how to utilize Tobin Heath, someone who understands, what Tobin Heath brings to the table, because she can be a difficult player to figure out sometimes if you aren't familiar with her skill set. She's a little bit unorthodox in how she plays on the wing, but utilized correctly, she is, again, one of the best players in the world, assuming that, injury-wise, she's able to get healthy, she's able to get a run of play, she's able to kind of get back in the swing of things. I think it makes sense to see her go to San Diego. Again, Angel City, especially if they miss out on Debinha, going for Tobin Heath is a pretty good backup plan, if you ask. Next on this list, I have Julie Ertz. Julie Ertz is another name with, she had a big injury back in 2021 when she was playing for the Red Star. She then took a year off for maternity leave. So she hasn't played competitive soccer since July 2021 when she was a Chicago Red Star And not only has Chicago really felt her presence, but the U.S. national team has really felt her lack of presence as well. You almost get the sense that the U.S. national team has been waiting patiently for Julie Ertz to come back to kind of figure out their sixth situation. So it makes sense that Julie Ertz's club situation is going to have a huge impact on the U.S. national team as well. I think it's interesting because Angel City obviously owned her rights last year as kind of a, if she decides to come back, we have her. But I kind of think that San Diego is a good fit for her in their 4-2-3-1. I also think that Julie Ertz playing in front of Naomi Girma with the kind of increased role that Girma is starting to play in the U.S. national team could be important for 2023 to be able to have that understanding with kind of that central defense with how Julie Ertz plays. I think, if you add Julie Ertz and Tobin Heath to that team, now San Diego, even though they were already on their way up, are now even more dangerous and definitely a team that no one wants to play. They get so much stronger. Now, does that work salary cap wise? Does that work contractually? I don't know if they have the space to bring in both of those players, but it's kind of a guesswork on who has the salary cap anyway. But I think that'd be interesting, especially since we don't necessarily know when Julie Ertz will be ready to return. That's kind of up in the air as well. If she does return, she may retire also. But I think, she'll definitely be on the West Coast. Obviously, her husband, Zach, plays for the Arizona Cardinals. She's from Arizona. I would expect her, if she does come back, to want to stay, somewhat close to that situation. And San Diego just makes a lot of sense to me. Let's move on to one near and dear to my heart, as Desiree Scott has yet to resign for the Kansas City Current. Now, Desi did just win the Ally Award for best teammate in the NWSL last year, and Kansas City Current posted a video today where Desi Scott said that, jokingly, that she's been wanting to retire every year since 2016, but the team is why she keeps coming back. And I think that's very telling that they would release that video on the eve of free agency. I think I don't have inside knowledge, but from reading the tea leaves, I think Desi either comes back with the Current or retires. I don't see her going anywhere else. She's one of two KC originals still from the original FC KC on this team, along with Lola Bonta, of course. And they came so close last year. It's so tantalizing that you'd want to come back for at least one last attempt at it. The team, one more year to gel. Sam Mewis and Lynn Williams coming back, like that, I think is, if you aren't just completely done with playing competitive soccer, I think that's where you want to be. Now, if Desi Scott does retire or does sign elsewhere, first free agency, I think it's maybe hard to predict in a way. Julie Ertz could be a good option in Kansas City as well. That's another little kind of turn up the notch on the rivalry a little bit. Kansas City and Chicago haven't really taken off as rivals yet, but that Midwest rivalry is always simmering. Add Julie Ertz to the mix to replace the Desi Scott. I think that's a pretty good like-for-like comparison, and that just makes a lot of sense too. Now, again, are either of those players coming back? We don't know that answer. We may know in a couple hours, though. So, last name on this list, another kind of KC Current Chicago Red Star connection, Morgan Gautreau, is also interesting. Now, Chicago Red Star have a couple players that I could see KC going out and looking at. I think Erin Wright is also a good shot. Erin Wright, maybe not that centerpiece defender like Morgan Gautreau is, but she would probably fit in with the Elizabeth Balls of the world, with the Alex Loeras of the world, and, kind of being that same mold of player. I think both of those players could look at going to KC, one or the other. I think KC are going to be very active in the center back market. And especially if it's all up in the air, right? If Des Scott leaves, Alex Loera probably moves into the midfield. That's that position that she played during the playoffs last year. If that's the case, they're going to need to bring in another center back, especially if Kristen Edmonds doesn't come back. There's a lot of options out there, and there's a lot of options I think make this team better on paper, at least. That's kind of the only hole they have left is that center back position. Kate Delfava, Haley Mace out wide. The midfield is pretty set up. You have Lynn Williams and Sam Ewis coming back. You may have to make a move. There is going to be an odd person out, whether that's Lola Bonta or Kristen Hamilton, or CC Kaiser even. There's some names there that are going to be fighting hard to find playing time that they had this year with Lynn Williams and Sam Ewis coming back. That's a good problem to have for KC, but that's a bit of a logjam that for a organization that frequently tries to do right by their players, there's going to be some movement there. And, as a fan, you might not be ready for it. Teams I haven't talked about a lot in this video, Orlando Pride, I think they have a lot going for them in Orlando. Do they lose Marta? I don't know. I think them missing the playoffs last year kind of changes their trajectory, but that's a pretty good ownership group. They've obviously shown that, they take player safety seriously. Ashlyn Harris retired today as well, so I could see a lot of movement going on in Orlando. Houston Dash, what happens there? Sophie Schmidt re-signed in Houston, so that's a big centerpiece of their team back in place. And, they have a lot of holes there as well. Even though they were a playoff team, they kind of surged late into the season. Losing Rachel Daly last year, I think you're still trying to replace that. That could be a place where Marta goes, maybe. I don't know. It's interesting. There's a lot of names out here. There haven't been a ton of noise coming out, so a lot of this is just like pure speculation, looking at the tea leaves, looking at what teams need holes to fill. There's also, the idea that some of these players just don't come back to the NWSL. That hurts me as an NWSL fan, but I think any option where the players can go, make more money for themselves, set themselves up in a better situation, and ultimately have control over their own destiny is something that we as fans, as bittersweet as that may be, have to be happy about. Power to the players. I think that's key in this sport. It's a player-driven league. It should be a player-driven league, and free agency is just one step towards that. All right, folks. Thank you so much for watching today. Leave me a comment down below where you think your favorite player will go, who you think your favorite team will sign. It's going to be a wild next couple of weeks. Chicago Red Stars may implode in the meantime. But until then, make sure you subscribe so you're getting my videos. Of course, I try to put out multiple videos every week. Give me a thumbs up if you liked it. And as always, my friends, we will talk soon.